I thought moving to America would fix my life. I was completely wrong. I used to believe one simple thing. If I could just get to America, my life would finally make sense. For years that idea lived inside my head like a promise. A promise that somewhere out there, across an ocean and thousands of miles, there was a place where everything would finally start working. A place where hard work actually paid off. A place where people didn't feel stuck. A place where dreams didn't feel like something only other people could afford. America.
That word meant something powerful to me growing up. It meant opportunity. It meant freedom. It meant the chance to become someone completely different from the person I felt trapped as.
My name is Daniel Okoye, and for most of my childhood, I lived in a small, crowded neighborhood where people didn't talk much about the future. Not because they didn't want one, because the future felt like something distant, something that belonged to other people. My father worked long hours repairing cars in a tiny garage that always smelled like oil and metal. He was the kind of man whose hands told his entire life story. Rough skin, small scars, permanent grease stains that never fully washed away. My mother sold homemade food at a small market stand. Every morning she woke up before the sun. Rice, stews, fried plantains. By 6 in the morning, she would already be standing behind a folding table serving customers who rushed past without really looking at her. They worked hard. Harder than most people I've ever met. But no matter how hard they worked, life never seemed to move forward. Bills came. Problems came. Opportunities rarely did. When I was 12, I saw my first American movie. It was playing on a small television in a neighbor's house. The signal was bad. The sound cut out sometimes. But none of that mattered, because what I saw on that screen looked like another world. Wide streets, bright cities, people driving nice cars and people talking about careers, universities, businesses, choices. I remember sitting there thinking one thing. That place must be different. And slowly, that idea started growing inside my mind. By the time I was 16, the plan had already formed. I was going to America, somehow. I didn't know exactly how. I didn't know when, but I believed that if I could just get there, everything would change. I studied harder than anyone in my class. Not because I loved school, because school felt like a ladder. And every test was another step closer to climbing out. I stayed up late reading English textbooks until my eyes burned. I watched videos online about American cities, New York, Chicago, Houston, Atlanta. Every video made the dream feel more real, more possible. When I finally got accepted into a university exchange program in the United States, I thought my life had officially begun. I was 22 years old, and I remember the day the acceptance email arrived. My hands were shaking as I opened it. When I read the words, "Congratulations" on the screen, I ran outside the house so fast I almost knocked over my mother's cooking table. "I got it!" I shouted. My father looked confused. "What did you get?" "I'm going to America." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he slowly wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at me carefully. "You're sure?" "Yes." My mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. My father smiled too, but it was a quieter smile, the kind that hides worry behind pride. "You worked hard for this," he said. "I know." "Just remember something," he added. "What?" "Every place has its own problems." At the time, I laughed. Of course he would say that. He had never left the country. How could he understand what America was like? What opportunities were waiting there? In my mind, America wasn't just another country. It was the answer, the solution. The place where everything would finally become easier. Looking back now, I realize how wrong I was. The flight to the United States lasted almost 11 hours. I barely slept. Not because I was uncomfortable, because I was too excited. My mind kept imagining the moment I would step outside the airport and see America for the first time. The moment my new life would begin. When the plane finally landed, my heart was racing. I remember walking through the airport and hearing English spoken everywhere. Fast, confident, natural. For a moment, I felt like I had stepped inside one of those movies I watched growing up. Outside the airport, everything looked bigger. The roads, the buildings, the cars, even the sky felt different somehow. I took a deep breath and smiled. I made it, I whispered to myself. I truly believed something magical had just happened. Like crossing the ocean had automatically changed my life. But reality doesn't work that way. The first shock came faster than I expected. The university dorm I moved into was smaller than my bedroom back home. 4 students shared the same space. The food tasted strange. The weather was colder than anything I had ever experienced. And suddenly, something I had never thought about before became very real. I was alone. Completely alone. No family, no childhood friends, no familiar streets. Just a city full of people who didn't know me and didn't care where I came from. At first, I told myself that was part of the adventure, part of becoming stronger, part of building a new life. But slowly, something else began creeping in. Doubt. Classes were harder than I expected. Not because I didn't understand the material, because everything moved so fast. Everyone else seemed confident. They spoke quickly. They joked with professors. They asked questions without hesitation. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, translating every sentence in my head before speaking. Afraid of saying something wrong. Afraid of sounding stupid. Afraid of being seen as the outsider. Then came the financial pressure. The scholarship covered tuition, but not everything else. Rent, books, food, transportation. America was expensive in ways I had never imagined, so I got my first job, cleaning tables in a restaurant near campus. The shift started at 6 in the evening and sometimes ended after midnight. Greasy plates, heavy trash bags, long hours standing. Every night I returned to my dorm exhausted, then woke up early for classes. Weeks passed like that. Work, study, sleep, repeat. The dream that once looked bright and exciting slowly started feeling heavy. But I kept telling myself one thing. This is temporary. This is the struggle before success. This is the price of opportunity. Then one night, something happened that forced me to question everything I believed about this country. It was close to midnight. The restaurant was closing. I had just finished wiping down the last table when 2 men sitting at the bar started arguing loudly. At first, it sounded like a normal disagreement. But then one of them looked at me and said something that froze me completely. "Hey," he said, pointing, "where are you from?" I hesitated. "Africa?" He laughed. "Figures." His friend chuckled too. Then he added something I will never forget. "You people always come here thinking this place will save you." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because he was angry, because he sounded completely sure, like he had seen this story many times before. I didn't respond. I simply finished my work and walked out of the restaurant. But that sentence followed me all the way back to my dorm room. "You people always come here thinking this place will save you." That night, lying awake in a narrow bed thousands of miles from home, I realized something uncomfortable. For years, I had believed America would fix my life, but no one had ever promised that. and the truth was only beginning to reveal itself. Because the hardest part of my journey hadn't even started yet. And the moment that would completely change the way I saw this country was still waiting for me. The next few months were where the illusion really started to break. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic, obvious way. It was slower than that, quieter. Like a crack forming in glass that you don't notice until it suddenly spreads across the entire surface. At first, I kept pushing forward. Same routine. Classes during the day, work at night, barely enough sleep in between. I told myself this was the price of building something better. That one day, I would look back and be proud of how hard it was. But there's something no one tells you about chasing a dream in a place that isn't yours. It's not just the work that drains you. It's the feeling that no matter how hard you try, you're always slightly out of place. In class, I started noticing it more. Group discussions would move quickly, and by the time I organized my thoughts into English, the topic had already changed. People didn't wait. Not because they were rude, because they were used to moving fast. I began speaking less, listening more, trying to stay invisible, and invisibility has a cost. One afternoon, we were assigned a group project. 3 other students, all American, confident, loud, efficient. At first they were polite, friendly even. But as the days passed, I noticed something subtle. They stopped asking for my opinion. They divided tasks without including me. One of them said, "It's just easier if we handle this part." Easier. That word stayed with me. I knew what it meant. It didn't mean the task was easier. It meant I wasn't. I became the guy who did the small parts. The background work. The things no one wanted to deal with. And every time I told myself it was temporary. Once they see what I can do, things will change. But things didn't change. Outside of school, work became heavier too. The restaurant got busier. More customers, more pressure, less patience. One night, my manager pulled me aside. "You're too slow," he said. "I'm doing my best," I replied. "I know," he said, "but your best needs to be faster." There was no anger in his voice, just expectation. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since arriving. I felt small, not physically, but in the way you see yourself, like no matter how much effort you put in, it's still not enough. The money I earned barely covered my expenses. Some weeks I had to choose between buying proper groceries or saving for rent. So I ate cheap. Instant noodles, bread, whatever I could afford. I lost weight. Not intentionally, just because survival became the priority. And slowly, the excitement that once filled me started fading. The city that once looked full of opportunity now felt overwhelming. Crowded streets didn't feel inspiring anymore. They felt lonely. Because being surrounded by people doesn't mean you belong. The hardest moments were the quiet ones. Late at night, when I returned to my dorm, shoes off, back against the wall, phone in my hand, scrolling through messages from home. My mother sending voice notes. My father asking simple questions. "How are you? Are you eating well? Are your classes going good?" I always gave the same answer. "I'm fine." Because how do you explain something like this? How do you tell them that the place you believed would change your life is slowly breaking something inside you? So I kept it to myself. But pressure builds. And eventually, something has to give. That moment came on a cold evening in late November. The kind of cold that gets into your bones. The restaurant was packed. Orders coming in nonstop. People complaining. Dishes piling up. I was moving as fast as I could, wiping tables, clearing plates, carrying trays, trying to keep up. Then it happened. I dropped a tray. It wasn't even that big, just a few plates, but the sound felt loud. Too loud. Everyone turned to look. The manager walked over immediately. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said. "I'm sorry," I replied quickly. He shook his head. "You need to focus." "I am focusing." "Then it's not enough." That sentence hit something deeper than it should have. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the months of pressure. Maybe it was everything building up at once. But something inside me snapped. "I said I'm trying," I said, louder than I intended. The room went quiet. The manager stared at me. Then his expression changed, not angry, dismissive. "If this is too much for you," he said, "maybe this job isn't for you." And just like that, I felt it, that same feeling again, small, replaceable, like I didn't belong here either. I finished the shift in silence. No one said anything else. No one needed to. When I walked outside that night, the cold air hit my face hard. I stood there for a long moment, breathing, thinking. For the first time since arriving in America, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What if this was a mistake? The thought scared me, because if this was a mistake, then everything I had built my life around was wrong. I walked slowly back to my dorm. The streets felt different that night, not full of possibility, just full. When I reached my room, my roommates were asleep. The lights were off. The space felt smaller than ever. I sat on my bed, staring at the floor. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Because the truth had finally caught up with me. Moving to America hadn't fixed my life. It had exposed everything I was trying to run away from. The insecurity, the pressure, the need to prove something. All of it had followed me here, and now I was facing it alone. That night I opened my laptop, not to study, not to watch anything, just to check something I hadn't looked at in a long time. Flights back home. The prices appeared on the screen. Expensive, but not impossible. For a moment, I considered it. Packing everything, leaving, going back. Admitting that maybe my father was right. Every place has its own problems. My hand hovered over the trackpad. All I had to do was click, but I didn't. Because something inside me wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Still, something had to change. Because if I kept going like this, I wasn't building a better life. I was slowly losing myself. And what happened a few days later would force me to make a decision I could no longer avoid. A decision that would change the way I saw not just America, but myself. The next few days felt different. Not better, just heavier. Like I was carrying something I could no longer ignore. That thought from the night before kept coming back. What if this was a mistake? I tried to push it away, focused on classes, on work, on routine. But once a question like that enters your mind, it doesn't leave quietly. It sits there, waiting, growing. I noticed it in small moments. When I walked into class and chose a seat in the back without even thinking. When I avoided eye contact during discussions. When I stopped raising my hand completely. I wasn't just tired anymore. I was starting to disconnect from people, from the dream, from myself. Even work felt different. I moved through my shifts like a machine. No thoughts, no emotions, just actions, clear table, wipe surface, carry dishes, repeat. One night, during a break, I sat in the back alley behind the restaurant. Cold air, dim light, the sound of traffic in the distance. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. my mother had sent another voice note. I pressed play. Her voice filled my ears, warm and familiar. "Daniel, we miss you. Your father fixed the old radio today. He said you would laugh if you saw how long it took him." I smiled slightly. Then the message continued. "We're proud of you. Don't forget that." That sentence hit harder than anything my manager had said, because it reminded me of something I had been avoiding. Back home, I wasn't failing. I was someone people believed in. But here, I felt invisible. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and for the first time, I admitted something to myself. I don't know who I am here. That was the real problem. Not the job, not the classes, not even the struggle. It was the fact that everything that once defined me felt gone. Back home, I was the guy who worked hard, the one who had a plan, the one who was going somewhere. Here, I was just another person trying to survive. And that realization scared me more than anything else. A few days later, something unexpected happened. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't life-changing at first glance. But looking back now, that moment shifted everything. I was in the university library, late afternoon. The place was quiet, filled with the soft sound of pages turning and keyboards clicking. I had a book open in front of me, but I wasn't really reading, just staring, lost in my own thoughts. That's when someone sat across from me. I didn't look up immediately, until I heard a voice. "You look like you're fighting something." I raised my head slightly. An older man was sitting there, maybe in his late 50s. Simple clothes, calm expression. Not a student, probably a professor. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He smiled slightly. "That's usually not true when someone says it like that." I didn't respond. I wasn't in the mood for conversation. But for some reason, he didn't leave. Instead, he opened a book of his own, sat quietly. Minutes passed, then he spoke again. "You're not from here." It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "Where from?" "Africa." He nodded. I thought so. Something in his tone felt different. Not judgmental, not curious in a superficial way, just observant. He closed his book. "Let me guess," he said. "You thought coming here would solve everything." I looked at him more carefully now, because that sentence felt too accurate. I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. "I've seen that look before," he continued. "Many times." "What look?" I asked. "The look of someone who believed in a place more than they believed in themselves." That sentence landed deep. I felt it immediately. He leaned back slightly in his chair. "America is not a solution," he said. "It's just a stage." I frowned. "I don't understand." He pointed lightly at the room around us. "All of this," he said. "The opportunities, the schools, the jobs, they're tools. Tools don't build anything by themselves. You do." I stayed quiet, listening, because something about what he was saying felt real in a way I hadn't heard before. "You came here thinking the environment would change your life," he continued. "But the truth is, you brought your life with you." My chest tightened slightly. "All the doubts you had," he said, "all the pressure, all the expectations, they didn't stay behind. They traveled with you." I looked down at the table, because I knew he was right. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked quietly. He paused for a moment, then said something simple. "Stop trying to prove you belong here." I looked up. "What?" You're exhausting yourself trying to fit into a version of success that doesn't belong to you, he said. That's why everything feels heavy. His words felt uncomfortable, because they were true. So, what should I do instead? He smiled slightly. Build something that reflects who you actually are. That sounded good, but also vague. I don't even know who that is anymore, I admitted. He nodded. That's honest. Then he leaned forward slightly. Let me tell you something, he said. Most people don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they spend their lives chasing the wrong version of it. The room felt quieter somehow, like everything else had faded into the background. You thought America would fix your life, he said. But what if it's just showing you what needs to be fixed? That sentence hit harder than anything else, because suddenly, everything made sense. The struggle, the discomfort, the pressure. It wasn't punishment, it was exposure. I sat there in silence for a long moment, processing everything. Then I asked the question that had been sitting inside me for days. What if I can't do it? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, calm, steady. Then he said something I will never forget. Then you learn, and you try again, and again, and again, until the person you're becoming is strong enough to handle the life you want. No shortcuts, no illusions, just truth. We sat there for a few more minutes. Then he picked up his book, stood up, and before leaving, he said one last thing. Don't waste this experience trying to escape it. Use it. And just like that, he walked away. I never saw him again after that day, but his words stayed. That night, I didn't look at flights home for the first time in months. I looked at my life differently. Not as something broken, not as something that needed fixing, but as something unfinished. And that changed everything. Because the next decision I made was the one that truly started to transform my life. And it had nothing to do with leaving America. It had everything to do with finally facing myself. That night, I didn't go back to being the same person. Nothing around me had changed. Same dorm, same job, same city, same problems. But something inside me had shifted, and that changed the way everything felt. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in the library over and over again. Stop trying to prove you belong here. At first, that idea felt uncomfortable, because for months, that's exactly what I had been doing. Trying to sound right, trying to act right, trying to keep up, trying to fit into a version of success that didn't even feel like mine. And the more I tried, the more I felt like I was failing. But what if that wasn't the goal? What if the goal wasn't to fit in, but to build something real? I got up, grabbed my notebook, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't write what I thought I should do. I wrote what I actually wanted. Not what looked impressive. Not what sounded successful. Just the truth. And the truth was simple. I didn't come all this way just to survive. I came to grow. But growth doesn't happen when you're hiding. The next morning, I did something small. But it felt big to me. In class, when the professor asked a question, I raised my hand. My heart was racing. My English wasn't perfect. I knew that, but this time, I spoke anyway. I took my time. I didn't rush. I didn't try to sound like anyone else. I just said what I understood. There was a small pause after I finished. Then the professor nodded. That's a good point, he said. It wasn't applause. It wasn't anything dramatic. But it mattered. Because for the first time since I arrived, I felt seen. That moment didn't fix everything, but it opened something. A door I had kept closed out of fear. And once that door opened, I didn't want to go back. At work, things were still hard. The pressure didn't disappear. The long hours didn't change. But I stopped seeing the job as something that defined me. It was just something I was doing, not who I was, and that shift made a difference. I moved differently, spoke differently. Even when the manager corrected me, it didn't hit the same way. Because I wasn't measuring my worth through his approval anymore. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, the version of me that had felt lost started coming back. But stronger, more honest, more grounded. I started connecting with people differently too, not by trying to impress them, but by being real. There was a guy in one of my classes named Marcus. At first, we barely spoke, but one day after class, he turned to me and said, "Man, I like the way you explained that idea earlier." It caught me off guard. "Thanks," I said. "You should talk more in class," he added. That simple conversation turned into more. Study sessions, coffee after lectures, real conversations. Not surface level, not forced, real. For the first time since arriving in America, I wasn't just existing around people. I was building connections. And that changed everything. Because success without connection feels empty. One evening, months later, I finished my shift at the restaurant and stepped outside. The air was still cold, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. I stood there for a moment, looking at the city that once felt overwhelming, the same streets, the same noise. But now, it felt different, not because it had changed, because I had. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. My mother had sent another voice note. I pressed play. "Daniel, we were talking about you today. Your father said you sound different on the phone lately. Stronger." I smiled. Not because of the words, because of what they meant. He could hear it, even from miles away. The change wasn't just inside me, it was real. That night, I finally called them. Not a quick call, not a "I'm fine" conversation, a real one. I told them everything. The struggles, the doubts, the moment I almost gave up. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then my father spoke. "I told you every place has its own problems," he said. I laughed slightly. "Yeah," I replied. "You were right." "No," he said. Then he paused. "You were right too." That surprised me. "How?" "You believed in something bigger," he said, "and you went after it. That matters." I sat there in silence, because I realized something in that moment. He was never against my dream. He just understood something I didn't. A place doesn't change your life. You do. And sometimes, you have to struggle before you understand how. Months turned into a year. Then more. I stayed. Not because I thought America would fix me anymore, but because I was finally building something real. My grades improved. I moved into a better living situation. Eventually, I left the restaurant job and found work related to my field. It wasn't easy. Nothing about the journey was easy, but it was mine, fully mine. And one day, standing in front of a building where I had just been offered a full-time position, I remembered the version of myself who stepped off that plane believing everything would be simple. I smiled, not because I felt superior to that version of me, but because I understood him now. He wasn't wrong for dreaming, he was just incomplete. And life had filled in the rest. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Moving to a new place won't fix your life. A new country won't fix your fears. Opportunity won't fix your identity. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. But if you're willing to face that, to grow through it instead of running from it, then something powerful happens. You stop chasing a better life, and you start building one. And that changes everything.